Hi YouTube and welcome back to True Crime Revealed. My name's Kira and today's case is going to take place in 2007 in Knoxville, Tennessee. Now I do want to go ahead and warn my viewers and subscribers that the story is very gruesome and disturbing. So if you're very easily triggered, I would suggest not to watch the video. It does involve torture, rape, sodomy, and ultimately murder. So it is involving two college students, one of which her name is Channon Christian, and the other is Chris Newsom. And they were actually dating, and one was 21, the other was 23, and they were basically trying to go to a party one evening and were ultimately hijacked by these four individuals who are very deviant monsters. And ultimately they went on a night of just basically torturing these individuals before they ended up murdering them. So it's a very sad story. It's one that has rocked the city of Knoxville. The location where it happened was actually bulldozed down because there was such terror that was inflicted there that they did not want to remember the place, so they ended up tearing it down. And it's a story that ended up being on Investigation Discovery and a lot of other platforms as well in the true crime world. So again, today's story is going to be on the murders of Channon Christian and Chris Newsom. As usual, if you guys like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. To those who have been subscribing, thank you. I see you. To those who have been commenting and liking, thank you as well. I hope that you guys learned something new on the story today, and let's get started.
Hi, guys. Welcome to True Crime Revealed. Today's story takes place in Knoxville, Tennessee in 2007. And for some people, it hits a little bit differently. Now, all of the stories that we do on this channel are horrible. They involve heinous crimes that should have never been committed, senseless acts of violence against people. But this one is a little bit different just because, of course, the individuals on my screen were, in fact, unfortunately murdered. But what's so messed up is just kind of what led up to the actual murders for the both of them. They were actually tortured, raped, and then ultimately killed. So for some people, it hits a little bit different. The story is extremely graphic in nature and very gruesome. I remember seeing the story on, I believe it was Investigation Discovery, and just being stunned by just how vile and wicked the assailants in this crime were. And it even involved a young woman as well, which we'll look at some of the pictures later and talk about the actual suspects. But it's a very sad and tragic case. It just goes against and defies human decency and dignity, and no one should ever have to experience anything like this. So I do want to warn my viewers and subscribers that the nature of this case is extremely disturbing. But we're going to go ahead and begin to discuss the tragic and untimely murders of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. The year was 2007 in the beautiful state of Tennessee, home to the legendary Country Music Hall of Fame with country superstars Dolly Parton and Elvis's Graceland. In Knoxville, Tennessee, a night of terror would ensue on none other than Chipman Street, involving a heinous crime taking the lives of 21-year-old Channon Christian and 23-year-old Christopher Newsom. Channon and Chris were two lovebirds that had been dating since November of 2006. Channon and Chris were excited about what the future held for the two of them, and the night of January 6, 2007, it was an ordinary night where they were just going to go to a party and watch movies with friends. Channon Gail Christian was born on April 29, 1985 in Texas. She's the daughter of Gary and Dina Christian. She actually moved with her family to Tennessee in 1997, and she was described as a good girl who never gave her parents any trouble. Her mom says that although she wasn't perfect, because no one is, she was a gorgeous girl with a gorgeous smile, but what made her the most beautiful was that she was humble and she wasn't stuck on herself. She actually went to the University of Tennessee and was 21 years old at the time of the murder, and she was a graduate of Farragut High School in 2003, majoring in sociology in college. She was about 5'8" and just a beautiful girl all around. Christopher Newsom was born on September 21st, 1983 in Knoxville, Tennessee. He is the son of Mary and Hugh Newsom, and he was an awesome baseball player. He was passionate about playing the sport. His high school coach said that he was a great kid and an awesome baseball player. Worked hard all through high school. His mother states that anybody who knew Chris was a friend, and he had a smile that everyone loved. He was 23 years old at the time of the murders, and he was working as a try carpenter in Knoxville. Prior to becoming a try carpenter, Chris had actually attended Pellissippi State Technical Community College. He had met Channon previously and started dating her in November of 2006. And ultimately, he was really excited about getting to know her better and seeing ultimately what the future would hold for the both of them. The following events leading up to the murder of Channon and Chris on the evening of January 6, 2007 into the early morning hours of January 7th, 2007 are a cautionary tale of wrong place, wrong time. This could have happened to anyone if they had been in the same location that this couple was at that particular time. On Saturday, June 6, 2007, Channon and Chris planned to go out for dinner together and then they were going to attend a friend's party. That afternoon, Channon went to her friend's apartment to get ready, and at around 8 p.m., Shannon's friend went to the party and let Channon stay behind so that she could wait for her boyfriend Chris to pick her up. Chris later arrives at the apartment complex to pick up Channon, and it's the Washington Ridge apartment homes. Now, when he picks her up, they decide to kiss. They're in a warm embrace. They're in the parking lot of the Washington Ridge apartment homes. And the suspects, the assailants, these thugs, monsters, whatever you want to call them, are in the parking lot watching them, and this is when they decide that the couple is vulnerable and they're going to attack them. So they ambush them from behind. They force the two of them into the back seat of Shannon's SUV at gunpoint, and they had their hands tied behind their backs. They were taken to one of the suspects, Davidson's home. We're going to talk about him in just a second. And this was at 2316 Chipman Street. And this is the last time that they're seen out in public after they're ambushed, forced into Shannon's car, and taken to 2316 Chipman Street. The home that you see on my screen is where the House of Horrors actually took place. Anyone looking at this house would think it's an unassuming home, just a regular Tennessee place to stay. And what we're going to talk about now is the utter horror that occurred here by these 5 individuals. So I know in my intro video I said that there were 4 assailants. There are actually 5. I do apologize for my misstatement there. These 5 thugs on the screen, one of which you see to the far right is actually a female. So it's just hard to believe that a female was actually involved with this disgusting crime, but she actually was. And so sometimes when I'm revisiting the case, I sometimes forget that she was a part of it, but she just as much as wrong as they were. And just knowing the horrors that Channon had to go through, and Chris, of course, had to go through, just knowing that there was an actual other female there witnessing as Channon is being tortured in the house, and she does not care. She just watches as they do whatever they want to do with this young lady and doesn't care. And I think the look on her face just says it all. It's just a yeah, and what type of attitude. All of them on the screen, as you can see, their eyes just look soulless, and they don't even look like they have a shred of remorse, any ounce of a conscience, remorse, nothing. So let's discuss who these thugs are and what part of the crime they had to do with it. So as you can see on my screen, these are the 5 suspects. You have Lamarcus Slim Davidson. He has the biggest picture on the screen because he's ultimately the mastermind behind all of this. He's actually the owner of the home, and he is ultimately one of the prime suspects, prime assailants in the actual case. and he is a very horrible person. Davidson was actually born on June 13th of 1981. Top left corner, we've got Eric Dwayne E. Boyd. He was actually born on February 18th of 1972. And then in the top right of the corner, we have Latalvis Rome Cobbins, and he was actually born on December 20th of 1982. Bottom left-hand corner, we have Vanessa Lynn Coleman. She is the female in the case. Unbelievable that a female would be involved with something so heinous, but she was. Born on June 29th, 1988. And then our final suspect here in the bottom right corner is going to be George G. Thomas, born on January 23, 1983. So we're going to go back to the center screen again with Mr. Lamarcus Davidson here, one of the main masterminds behind it all, if you will. He actually was originally from Memphis, and he had just in August of 2006 completed a 5-year sentence in a Tennessee previous felony conviction for a carjacking and aggravated robbery. He was actually indicted for a second robbery, which was committed at a Pizza Hut the day of the murder. So again, he's an individual who has absolutely no conscience at all. He has no empathy, no guilt, no nothing. He had already been serving a prison sentence, was basically let out, and comes out and acts the fool again, basically doing carjackings, robberies, even at Pizza Hut, even on the day of the murders. So this was a very busy, active criminal who, instead of going out to try to work hard, find a good living, make his own money, decides to make a criminal life of doing carjackings. And that's not the best part, quote unquote. And I mean that very sarcastically. He then decides to go on and murder these individuals and torture them in the process. Needless to say, he's a very sick individual, and scum like that does not need to be walking around the general public. They need to be locked up behind cages and in bars like the animals that they are. A lot of the other suspects in the case had already had other crimes that they had already been indicted for as well. So these guys were no strangers to living a life of just crime amongst the street. When they did what they did the night of January 6th, it was just another night. They were used to doing things like that before. So what starts off as a carjacking of Shannon's car on the evening of January 6th going into January 7th then turns into a night of torture, rape, and murder. So what happens is these 5 assailants end up taking Channon and Chris back to Lamarcus's home, and this is where both Channon and Chris are raped. Chris is actually believed to have been raped inside Davidson's house, and he was raped by a minimum of one of the perpetrators. Chris was also raped with an actual object as well. So they basically disrespected this man, they tortured him, they raped him while they were in the home, and then they actually took a dog leash and walked him to the railroad tracks. So after he was raped repeatedly by one of the assailants with an object, they take a mangled dog leash, put it around his neck, and they make him basically walk to the railroad tracks here where they basically finish him off. So what happens is they ended up shooting him once in the back, once in his neck. It was said that had he survived, he actually would have been a paraplegic because of where specifically on his spine that they shot him in his back. He would have been a paraplegic. They also shot him in his neck. And then they finally do one more in the back of his head, execution style. And that is the shot that ends up killing Christopher Newsom. So, as if that was not enough for them to degrade this man, rape him, put a dog leash on him, and walk him on the railroad tracks like he's an animal, shoot him 3 times, causing him to become a paraplegic, and then shooting him in his head, these animals then decide to set Chris aflame, and they light him on fire, and they burn his body. It is unbelievable the torture that this young man had to endure before he took his last breath and last moments on this earth. And I know he was heartbroken knowing that his girlfriend was in that house, knowing that she's hearing everything that's going on, knowing that he's hearing her be abused as well, and there's nothing that he can do to protect her. He felt hopeless and so alone, and it is truly a nightmare. It is stated that he was actually blindfolded, he had a sock in his mouth, and he was only wearing a shirt and underwear as they walked him on the railroad tracks to his untimely death. Now, back on Chipman Street at the house, while Chris has already been executed and his body is burned, Channon is now enduring days of horror at the house, and it is so sad what is happening to this girl. Now, it's said that she was actually a virgin. She was actually a virtuous young woman. She was trying to wait until marriage before she had sex. She is raped repeatedly by the different guys in the house, and she was raped vaginally, she was raped anally, she was forced to give oral sex to the numerous guys, the assailants, these thugs that were back in the house. She was beaten and she was dragged around the house as well. She actually had carpet burns all over her body because they would just basically drag her all over the house. She also endured extensive hemorrhaging to her head and her vaginal area, and she actually suffered bruises all over her body as well. So she was tortured for days on end. She was repeatedly raped for at least about 36 hours. And again, Miss Coleman was there, saw everything that was going on, but did not care, heard her screams, knew as a female that she was being violated, and she did not care. So this poor girl, who was a virtuous young woman saving herself for marriage, was basically abused, sexually raped, and was beaten and tortured for all of 36 hours by these thugs in the home. Meanwhile, her boyfriend has already been set ablaze on the railroad tracks, leaving her vulnerable and defenseless in this house of horrors. So it's stated that all the while she was being tortured in this house of horrors, she kept screaming, "I don't want to die. I don't want to die." She was actually taped and tied to a chair where she was orally raped repeatedly by two of the suspects, Davidson and Cobbins. And she basically also was raped with an object that was consistent with what they did to Chris as well. So this poor girl was tortured. She was crying. She was screaming. It fell upon deaf ears, and she was ultimately violated in every way you can imagine, which is absolutely sad and horrific that she would have to go out this way. Now, before killing her in an effort for these animals to remove her DNA evidence in attempts for them to do that, they, of course, have already had a night of horror with her. They've done what they've wanted with her. They've done what they've wanted with Chris as well. They, of course, don't want to get caught. So the geniuses decide that they're going to remove the evidence by pouring bleach down her throat to disinfect and remove the evidence in the DNA, and they end up scrubbing her body, including her bleeding and battered genital area with it. If you just get a paper cut and you get alcohol in it, you know how much that stings and burns. So imagine having carpet burns all over your body. Imagine having cuts all over your body. Imagine being raped vaginally, anally, and orally, and how sore you already are, and then having bleach doused all over your body, poured down your throat in an effort and an attempt to remove any type of evidence. They actually hog tie her with some of the curtains and items from around the house as well, and they put her face down with a garbage bag over her head to suffocate her, and they disposed of her body in 5 large trash bags and dump her in the trash can in the kitchen, all the while she's still alive in the trash can, ultimately in pain, suffocating slowly to death. This poor girl Channon suffered. Her naked body lie naked except for a camisole and a sweater She was tied in a fetal position and was placed inside a residential waste disposal unit covered with sheets. The medical examiner testified at trial that there was evidence that she was actually slowly suffocating to death, and Channon actually died the afternoon of January 7th. Between that afternoon and the afternoon of January 8th, sometime in between then is when she died. Now, all the while, Channon is suffocating to death, her body bruised, burning in bleach, and suffocating. Davidson decides to leave and take Shannon's personal items and Chris's cell phone and Chris's shoes. And he went ahead and he spent some time with his girlfriend. Imagine that. You destroy the evening and the lives of this couple, but then you want to go spend time with your own girlfriend. You give your girlfriend Shannon's personal items, and he decides to keep Chris's cell phone and wears Chris's shoes. The utter audacity and lack of respect displayed in this case is mind blowing. It's shocking. It's something of a fictional story, only it's real, because who could actually fathom that someone would actually do this, that human beings would actually do this to another human being? Unbelievable. So, for the investigation, how these thugs end up getting caught, and ultimately Channon and Chris's parents and family knowing what happened, is after Channon and Chris did not show up at the party, the couple's friends actually began calling and texting them, and they received no response. And around 11 p.m., two of Chris's friends went to the apartment where the couple had been kidnapped and last seen, and they saw Chris's truck in the parking lot, but they were unable to locate Shannon's SUV. So there was a witness who worked as a driver for Waste Connections, and Waste Connections is a facility that's right near the Chipman house. And he stated that he arrived at work on the Chipman Street at around 12:30 a.m. on January 7th, and he noticed that the lights were on at 2316 and that the house seemed busy for that time of night. He said that he saw a 4Runner in front of the house with its porch lights on, and the witness later observed that the 4Runner was driving slowly by him. He describes that there were about four black men in the car who were essentially just kind of checking him out, just kind of seeing who he is, what's going on, wondering if they were going to get caught, basically. And another witness who lived around one block from the home states that they heard three pops from the direction of the train tracks at around 1:45 a.m. And that, of course, is the time that Chris was executed on the railroad tracks. On Monday, following the events, Chris's body is actually located on the railroad tracks. His body was found burnt, and he was actually found by a detective whose son was a friend of Chris's, and they said that they recognized him because of his eyes. And that is what his father recounts in an interview, that they recognized him by his eyes. When Chris's body was found on the railroad tracks and it was burnt, of course, it was discovered that he did have semen that was found in and on his body. However, most of it was already burnt because they had set him aflame. Over the course of the next 2 days, of course, Channon was dying in the trash can and the trash bag, suffocating. She stayed there about 2 days until they discovered her body. On January 9th, when police went into the home, they found her in the trash can, and they stated that they saw on the bags it had Davidson's prints. His prints were also found on a box of the garbage bags, and his sperm was also found on Shannon's body in her vagina as well. So his DNA evidence was everywhere. It was also found in her anus, while Cobbin's sperm was found in her mouth. So there was DNA all over her, despite their efforts of dousing her in bleach, which was totally unnecessary because they still got caught anyway as well. Now, Davidson's sperm was also found on Shannon's jeans, while Cobbin's sperm was found on her camisole, sweater, and jeans. There were shell casings found at the home that matched the actual bullets that killed Chris, so that's how they were ultimately able to prosecute these individuals who murdered Channon and Chris. Police eventually found out that some of the suspects had been making phone calls with each other, just kind of discussing the murders. They also seized some devices where some of the suspects were actually watching news coverage on the murders as well. Police also seized evidence that showed that they had some belongings that belonged to Channon. It was a purse and an overnight bag that had a lot of Shannon's belongings. So because this was in their possession as well, this was also damning evidence. So like most murderers, they all love to do the crime, but they don't want to do the time. They were seen in court basically betraying each other, blaming one another, and no one really wanted to take the fall, but ultimately all of them were convicted, and I'm going to tell you what came about their sentences. Eric Boyd was originally only given 18 years as an accessory to the carjacking. However, thankfully, 11 years after the initial indictment, he was actually returned with a 36-count indictment, which included things like robbery, kidnapping, rape, and ultimately first-degree murder. So they were able to upgrade him to actually receiving a life in prison sentence. So that was great. Latalvius Cobbins was convicted of felony murder, and he too was also sentenced to life in prison, as he should have been. In December of 2009, George Thomas was also found guilty on multiple counts, and the jury returned a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for each of the 4 capital convictions. Vanessa Coleman was actually the last defendant to face trial, and she was actually granted immunity by federal authorities for testimony in the federal case of the carjacking, but the state courts ruled that the federal grant of immunity could not extend to the state charges of murder and rape. So I personally don't think that she deserved to get immunity. She was a very wicked individual. The fact that she was there condoning it and didn't do anything about it to try to help makes her just as guilty. And there was also a chilling statement that they found in a letter that Miss Coleman had actually written as well. She journals and states the following as if she is an excited 16-year-old girl that kissed her boyfriend for the first time, and she can't wait to write about it in her journal. She writes, referring to the night of the murders, and I quote, "Last night was one of a kind. We stayed with a crackhead that is cool as hell. It snowed a little bit, but it's already melted. Let's talk about adventures. I had one hell of an adventure since I've been in the Big TN. It's a crazy world these days, but I love the fun, adventures, and lessons that I've learned. It's going to be a long, interesting year." This is an actual letter, journal, that Vanessa Coleman wrote that was used as evidence about how she felt about that night. It is utterly sick and disgusting. Now, on May 13th of 2010, Coleman was acquitted of first-degree murder. However, she was sentenced to 53 years in prison. So even though she was acquitted of murder, they still were able to sentence her on lesser charges. And she was sentenced to 53 years in prison, which is a nice hefty charge, which she absolutely deserves. Now, last but certainly not least, Lamarcus Davidson, our mastermind, our devil behind the crime, the mastermind here. The jurors unanimously found that Davidson should receive the death penalty, which is awesome, on the 4 capital charges, 2 first-degree felony murders, and the 2 premeditated first-degree murders of Channon and Chris. In 2010, he was actually sentenced to 80 years for other charges that were related to the murders as well. Before I wrap up the video, I do want to show a clip of the actual sentencing where the family was able to get justice, so I want to show that as well.
For the first time, a jury say death was punishment.
With regard to the count charging Mr. Davidson with the first-degree felony murder of Hugh Christopher Newsom, that is counts 1, 2, 5, 6, 10, 13, and 14, what is the decision of the jury as to what the punishment should be with regard to those counts?
The punishment is death.
A Knox County jury today imposed a death sentence on convicted ringleader Lamarcus Davidson in the killings of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. They pronounced death on felony murder and first-degree murder for Chris's death, and also death as punishment for the first-degree murder and felony murder of Channon Christian. It was welcome news for the family. They felt cheated of justice when Davidson's brother, Latavis Cobbins, received a sentence of life without parole.
Well, the Christians, the Newsoms, and all of Knoxville got justice today. We finally got the justice that the kids deserve, and it makes me feel good.
The jury was from Knox County. They are the pillars of our community. We should take our hats off to them, and we should give them a round of applause.
It is my duty as a judge in this case to impose a punishment of death by lethal injection. May you find peace with your Maker.
America's Davidson is still currently appealing, and they keep getting denied, as they should, and I believe that he will be put to death when the time comes. But of course, he's going to try to appeal it as many times as he has allotted, of course. So the House of Horrors that it happened at was such a stigma and such a stain and a horrible memory in the city of Knoxville that Waste Connections trash service that was right next to the home, they actually bought the home, and in 2008 October they actually tore it down because they did not want the memory to be there and that stain, that indelible mark, to be left. So what they did was they ended up making a memorial in Channon and Chris's honor so that they could be remembered as the beautiful kids that they were, but not that horrible house of horrors. So Channon and Chris's parents make sure that their legacy is remembered in a positive way. The Christians actually created the Channon Gale Christian Foundation, and they actually give out scholarships each year to a surrogate graduating girl that's going to be attending the University of Tennessee, and they do a golf tournament as well each year for her honor. Each year, for Chris's honor, they have a little league baseball tournament that is held each year for his honor. They also have a memorial scholarship as well that's given annually to a graduating Halls High School senior, and they also have a really nice plaque that is put up in the community as well for Chris. So that is the story, guys. If you have made it to the end of the story, thank you guys so much for watching. I know this was a long one. I know it was very gruesome. There's a lot going on. There's 2 victims, there are 5 suspects, so there's a lot to kind of dive deep in, and I wanted to give you guys as much information as possible in this story. I told you it was a horrific one, it's a disgusting one, it's a very tragic one for the family, but there was justice served in the end for these victims. My prayers and thoughts go to the parents of both these kids, both Channon and Chris. I cannot imagine what kind of a heartache that is, but I pray that the family has received some type of comfort through the years, although I know it's a type of hurt and heartache that will never go away no matter how much time passes. This is something that will be in their memories and hearts forever. But again, my thoughts and prayers go with the victims' parents and families. As usual, if you guys like this video today and you learned something new, I'd love to have you back. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.